Hey everybody, it's Professor Parish, and I am recording our week 14 video a little bit earlier than usual, only because I'm going to be out of town from Thursday through Monday. So I've got an extended trip I have to go on, and so I'm not going to actually be at my computer for several days, which is unusual for me because usually I'm very quick with replying. And I usually record videos for the upcoming week on Sunday or over the weekend. So I'm recording this very early. I am going to have my phone with me, so I will basically put this video on YouTube, and then on Sunday, probably Sunday night late, I will be getting on my phone and copying the link into our actual course so that you can see the video starting on Sunday. Monday is Veterans Day, so the college is closed on that day, and so if you don't get to watching the video until Monday, that's perfectly fine. But a couple of other things about week 14. Week 13 is happening right now, so your narrative paper is due for week 13. Make sure you have that completed. I've graded a few that have been turned in early, but chances are, because I'm going to be away from my computer for so long, grading is going to be a little bit later than it normally is. I know I'm very usually up to date with grading and getting your grades posted online, but there's going to be a little bit of a lag for week 14, so just bear with me. I am going to spend week 14 during the week actually grading your narrative papers and your grammar reviews and your discussion forums, so don't worry, you will get a grade on those assignments, and I'll try to get your papers graded as soon as possible so that you have time to revise them. But with that being said, we're going to talk about week 14, so I'm going to minimize myself over here in the corner, and we're going to talk about week 14. So scrolling down to week 14 on here, one thing that you will notice right off the bat is we do not have a discussion forum for week 14. So I'm sure you're all thrilled. There's actually only 2 assignments for week 14, so it's going to be a little bit lighter than the last couple of weeks, which I'm sure most of you are very excited about. So we only have 2 assignments due week 14, which will be due on November 17th. So those assignments are going to be the reading response number 2, and then our writing prep for our last paper, which is argument. So the only reading assignments you have for week 14 are in our English skills textbook. Please make sure that you read chapter 16. This is specifically on argument. It's pages 307 to 322. It's going to go over a lot of important information, so please make sure that you take the time to read that chapter, and that will help you get prepped for the writing argument prep assignment. So with that being said, I want to go over the 2 assignments due for week 14. One is the reading response number 2. Ignore this Sunday, April date. Ignore that. I'm going to change that as soon as this video's finished. What our reading response, a lot of you did really well on the first reading response. Some of you didn't do the assignment, so make sure you do this as well, because it is worth 20 points. So it is worth quite a bit. So, reading response number 2. What this basically is if you end up taking English 122 with me later on down the road, we actually go over Nick and David Sheff's texts. Beautiful Boy, which is by David Sheff, and Tweak, which is by Nick Sheff. They both deal with addiction. Specifically, Nick struggles from a lot of addiction during his adolescent years into his young adulthood, and David's his father, so David kind of accounts what it's like for a parent dealing with a child that has addiction, and how that, how does guilt and blame and personal factors go along with that. But the main thing between these 2 novels is the idea of memory, and how these 2 individuals that are very closely connected and that share a lot of the same memories, how those are different despite them being the exact same memories. So what I've done here is that there's a link to a video where it interviews both of them, and kind of they both talk about their experiences and kind of how they relate to memory and recount the affliction that they both have. And then there's also this short article from the New Scientist about memory and how 2 people can actually recall the same thing differently, which is really interesting. I think it's very fascinating how memory works and how we remember things differently, even if we're attending the same event. So what I would like for you to do is to watch this video. It's not very long, and then read this short article. And then in a one-page double-spaced response, I want you to answer these 3 questions. So the first one is, Nick and David Sheff have differing but similar memories of each other and their state of being during Nick's teen to adulthood. How does this article on memory help explain this? How are their memories similar but different? Number 2 is asking, Nick's memory could be skewed due to his addiction, very much so, but David is only an outsider on Nick's life. How can we treat either Nick or David as a reliable narrator for telling Nick's experiences, why or why not? So in narration, we assume that our narrator is reliable, that there's someone we can trust, but that's not always the case. In the case of David, he's Nick's father, so he can't know exactly what Nick is feeling or experiencing during his recounting of memories that's happened to him. And Nick's addicted to several drugs, so his memory is going to be affected. And so they're both unreliable in their own ways. Can we rely on either of them? Why or why not? And then finally, how does the idea of narration help us to understand how we as individuals can have different views on a situation or memory? So how does narration help us to understand the way that we recount things or that we remember situations? A lot of your papers that I've read so far are dealing with very specific personal memories. So that's just something to think about. How does writing out a narration paper help to come to grips with that? So we're kind of finishing out our discussion of narration with this reading response, but I find Nick and David Sheff's story really fascinating. We actually read excerpts from both of their books in English 122 in my section. So this is kind of an extra little thing that you all get to experience, this interview between both of them and then this article on memory. So that's the reading response number 2, and it is due Sunday, November 17th by that night. And then the other thing is our argument paper. So I'm going to pull up our guidelines for argument, and we're going to talk about our final paper in this class. So if you're taking English 121, or if you plan to, then typically that class as well rounds out talking about argument. So argument is a fun paper. It's probably my favorite in the class because it's a chance for you to vocalize your opinion about something. Argument does not mean ranting or yelling, or it's not a violent genre. I know a lot of people think of argument as like a negative or violent expression. And really what argument is just addressing your opinion and showing why you are in favor of something and why you disagree with something else. And you can construct an argument paper very calmly, very collectively, and still be very effective. I think some students, they're like, I have to rant and scream about my opinion to be heard. And that's not the case. Quite opposite. If you really want someone to get on board with your side of an issue, ranting or screaming is not going to incite people to agree with you. Chances are they'll probably do the exact opposite. So what you want to do is construct a paper that uses facts, that uses sources, that has support to help you prove your point. And so chapter 16 talks a lot about argumentation, about how to do it effectively, and some things to avoid to make sure that, because you are trying to persuade someone. The other papers we've done in this class did not necessarily have to have that theme or agenda. Maybe in your compare and contrast paper, you were trying to convince somebody. Absolutely. But the whole point of this paper is you are persuading. So what does your final paper need to have? Well, it needs to have an introduction paragraph where you talk about your points. It needs to have multiple body paragraphs and a conclusion. The page length is not going to change on this paper. It's still going to be 3 pages at least, but you are welcome always to add on extra materials if you want to, but it's not going to be any longer than your other papers. Now, when you get to English 121 and 122, that may change, but for 109, we're going to keep it with 3 full pages. And the point breakdown is pretty much going to be very similar to our other papers. So what I want to know is what you're planning on talking about with your argument paper, and then what your points are going to be. I'll go ahead and tell you some topics that have been overdone the last couple of years, to the point where I'm like, if you feel strongly about these topics, I'm not going to dissuade you from writing about them, but they are tired. Legalizing marijuana, I think, is a moot point to talk about. at this stage of the game because we are going to be legalizing it in the state come January. The only thing I can think of is if you find something new about legalizing marijuana that you want to address, such as growing it or medicinal purposes or something like that. If you want to focus on that, I'm totally okay with it. But if your whole argument is like, we need to legalize marijuana, well, guess what? Your argument has been proven because we're going to be doing that in January. So don't do that topic. Abortion is a hot topic, a very strong topic, and people have a lot of strong opinions about it. I feel like it's a topic that can be hard to restrain yourself during, which this paper does require a little bit of restraint. So you are welcome to talk about it if you want, but it's a bit of an overdone topic as well. Those two are really the only two that I've read countless papers on that I try to steer students away from. I'm like, you can find more creative argument topics. Smoking is bad is another one. That's an easy topic and it's been overdone. I want to encourage you with this last paper to think outside the box. Think about something that really deeply affects you and that's personal for you, and that will help you be more enthusiastic as you research and write about it. So I'm not going to dissuade anyone from those topics, but they have been very, very overdone. So I am going to be very critical of them since I've read so many papers on them. So if you're going to choose those topics, be prepared for me to be a bit more critical on the content of those issues. All right. As always, you can email me questions. Even though I'm going to be out of the office, I am going to have access to my email. I just won't be checking it as regularly as I do when I'm at home. So if you're expecting me on Sunday night to reply back to you, that may or may not happen. So just keep that in mind, but I am excited to see what topics that you do pick for our paper, and I hope that you've enjoyed doing the narration paper and the other ones so far, because this is our final paper for the class. So that's the only two assignments that are due this week, the reading response and the writing prep. Both of those are due Sunday, so you will not have any assignments due this coming Friday, the 15th. You won't have any assignments due by Friday, so that'll be a nice change of pace. But if you have questions, please let me know. Please do not forget about the assignments for week 13, which are due on November 10th. So don't forget about the grammar review. I've already created my own work. So yeah, don't forget about the grammar review, the discussion forum, or mainly don't forget about turning in your narration paper, because that is a lot of points that I don't want you to miss out on. Okay, the narration paper and the grammar review are due Sunday night. The discussion forum post is due Friday, and your responses are due Sunday. So I hope you all have a great week and weekend. If you have any questions, let me know. But otherwise, I look forward to talking to you all again soon. All right.